Greetings, my name is Darian M. Coronado and welcome to your first guitar lesson as the instructor. The purpose of this lesson is to create a blueprint for an engaging introductory guitar lesson for those that have little to no experience teaching guitar. And with that being said, this will primarily be discussion based and pedagogical. In this video, we'll be discussing how I approach teaching introductory guitar lessons for beginners, as well as the methodology behind it. And as the series continues, I will cover how I approach subsequent guitar lessons, including how I teach general music concepts, as well as specific songs. Before jumping in, as always, I want to give a shout out to my patrons over on Patreon, because it's your support that allows me to continue to create this content to share across these platforms. Thank you. I truly appreciate you and your support. All of the lesson materials for what we'll be discussing today, including manuscript, tablature, and chord charts, can be located on my Patreon. They can be accessed by either becoming a paid member or as individual purchases in my feed and within my shop. I've also organized a bulk of my content on Patreon into the collection section, and this will be under the Teaching Techniques and Tactics collection. Pedagogy is a method and practice of connecting theoretical educational concepts with real-world instruction and application. And for our purposes, we're going to break my pedagogy down into two things, which will be tactics and techniques. Tactics will relate to what we're doing and why we're doing it. What we're doing is creating an introductory guitar lesson plan for beginners. And beginners can be tiny humans, teenagers, adults, senior citizens alike. We're classifying beginners as players and learners that have little to no experience with the instrument. Why we are doing this is because we are trying to engage our learners, motivate them musically, and encourage them to return to our studios. Technique relates to how we're going to accomplish the what and the why. The focal point of our approach is going to be pulse and rhythm while incorporating very basic guitar technique. Guitar is the vehicle while the music is the fuel, and musicianship is our destination. And most importantly, who is this designed for? This lesson is designed for guitarists, musicians, and educators who maybe have little to no teaching experience, are intimidated by teaching, or aren't sure where to begin and are enthusiastic about teaching. This will be a jumping off point that can serve as the base for how you can craft your first lesson and or lessons. If you're an instructor that works at a private music school or a music shop where you have a rotating door of students, this lesson is designed for you to engage your students quickly and strongly, so that way it'll ensure the growth of your studio. And last but most certainly not least, the students. This may primarily be directed for guitarists and other musicians, but make no mistake, this is a student-centered lesson, and the focal point is to engage students. The more fun that the students are going to have, the more fun you're likely going to have as you're teaching them. The materials that we utilize for our lessons can be just as important for the lessons themselves. Before we jump in, the first thing that I would like to address is that whatever materials that we are using for our lessons, they should be prepared before the lesson starts as often as possible. So that way, the entirety of the lesson is going to be focused on teaching the student themselves. It'll be focused on them. And also, speaking of materials, having a plan for what we're going to take in regards to our rig is just as important as the lesson itself too. On most days that I teach, and for the last 9 years probably of teaching, I've taken my steel string, my Takamine G series that I got in like 2010 or something like that, or I'll take my Yamaha THR-10 and I'll take one of my electrics, be it my Berg or my Squier Strat or my 7, whatever it is. I plan it out based on who I'm teaching that day. If I'm teaching someone who's going to work on deathcore and such, and I know that there's not an instrument in the shop that's in B and C, or if I need a 7, then I'm taking my 7, because then I can use whatever they do have in the shop if it's just a steel string or what have you. So I plan ahead in that regard as well. However, more often than not, I am using my steel string. And right now I'm using the Berg because it is past midnight and my fiance is sleeping in the room next door. So now I have a lot more control over my sound, and my rig, I'm not really adjusting my pedal board to the clean sound that I would normally have in my lessons, because my sound is really wet from working on Twin Tribes and Whir prior to doing this. One last note before getting into the meat of all this is, despite the playing that I will be doing to demonstrate this in the lesson, more often than not, again, I am not actively playing. Normally I'm guiding and instructing the actual learner, and we'll see what I mean as I continue this lesson. The setup. We are going to be playing an 8-bar progression consisting of 3 chords in G major. We're going to be playing G, G major 7, E minor, back to G major 7. So the second and the fourth chords will be the exact same chord. Generally, our lessons are going to be either 30, 45-minute or 60-minute lessons, but I'm going to cater this to being a 30-minute lesson, as most beginning guitar lessons of any age bracket and demographic are generally going to be 30 minutes. For the first 2 to approximately 4 to 5 minutes of the lesson, I'm building rapport and I'm communicating with the student. Are they a tiny human who has their parents sitting in on the lesson? It's their very first lesson doing anything. Are they a teenager who's maybe got some experience playing in orchestra, or they play piano just from learning YouTube videos? Are they an adult who's always wanted to play? Is it a senior citizen? Who is the learner? And I'm getting to know them a little bit. And as I'm getting to know them, one of the first things that I'm usually doing is I'm tuning for them. If they've never played before, the last thing that I'm going to get hung up on is teaching them how to tune, because that's not going to be the fun part. That's not going to be the engaging part. Annoyingly though, it's the most important part, because if we're not in tune, it's not going to sound good. It won't sound right, and it'll be just as hard for them to replicate good sounds at home. So I will tune for them if they brought their own guitar, or if the school is providing one for them. And while I'm tuning, I am communicating and building that rapport. As it stands right now, it is the beginning of June, which means that the end of the school year is upon us. I'm talking to them about their newfound freedom with the summer. Are they making plans for summer break? What do they got going on? Did they have a classroom party on the last day of school? What's happening? Last but not least in the setup, we will be playing a single string melody on the first string, which will culminate in a 3-string voicing chord progression. Now, after we've tuned and approximately the 2 to 4 minutes, maybe 5 have blown by, I start showing them the basics of what the instrument is and the setup for it. We have 6 strings. The first one is closest to our feet. The 6th string is closest to our head. And those are the only 2 that we need to know, because everything that we're gonna do is gonna be sequential in terms of our numeric system. As in, if this is number 1, this is gonna be number 2. But at this point, I'm engaging with my learner to have them respond and have them answer. As in, I'll give them the answer if this is number 1, so then this is the next string, the next number, which will be number 2, which means this string is number, fill in the blank, and then I'll go to the next one. If this is number 3, this will be number, and then we arrive again at number 6. And I'll do the same thing with the fret numbers themselves as well. I'll point out that this is number 1. So if this is number 1, the next box, the next number will be number, fill in the blank. The next will be fill in the blank, fill in the blank. And I'll go up to a certain point, maybe the 7th fret, but then I do point out that we're not going to count every single one up, but our numbers and frets will go up until we just run out of numbers and frets. The last thing that I make a distinction with are the finger numbers for our fretting paw, because some of these cats in beginning lessons will have experience, say, playing piano. And if they've played piano, that means their thumbs have been assigned to number 1. So their index will be 2, 3, so on and so forth. So we would reprogram that rather, and our index finger would be number 1, as in I want 1 of something, I want 2, 3, give me 4 hot dogs, whatever it is. And this idea might seem overtly simple, but all these little things go a really long way based on how much we've gathered from the initial engagement. And now that all the boring stuff is out of the way, and that last chunk took another approximate minute or a minute and a half, now we are up at either the 5 or 7 minute mark. And now it's time to get into the actual playing. And as I mentioned before, I'm not really concerned with getting perfect and clean notes. This is a rhythm-centered lesson. This is a rhythmically focused lesson. And I will assign them the index finger on the 3rd fret of the 1st string. And when we go here, I'm giving them the idea of when we squeeze this string with our thumb behind our index finger, it's like we're pinching something. Our thumb wants to support our first finger, because if our thumb is not there, then we're just petting something. Because a lot of the time, right away, when people put their paw up, especially tiny humans, their thumb is gonna go underneath. Their thumb will go way up high over the top, like they're gripping a baseball bat, or they're getting their fingers to come in to make a fist. But the pinching analogy goes a long way, because then I can demonstrate a pinch where if I'm holding that third fret on that first string and I remove the guitar, they can see my thumb right behind, and I'm squeezing and I'm pinching. So I have them start applying that pressure to that first string, and then we're pushing. And speaking of pushing, as we're pushing through, I am using a pick in my right paw, but ordinarily I'm not having them use one, because if they're a beginner with, again, little to no experience, I believe that it's a little bit easier to work through them feeling the string underneath their flesh. They can make contact with it, as opposed to getting a louder sound with a pick and then sacrificing having that sensation under their finger. It's less kinesthetic. Now again, at this point, we're squeezing and we're pushing through. And at this point, ordinarily I am playing with them. I might get up in their grill a little bit to adjust their fingers. If their thumb is having a hard time sitting behind on the neck, then I'll hold their thumb with my right paw and just keep it balanced. And if they're pushing through and they're not getting a really clean sound, again, I'm not really concerned with that. I'm not really worried about it. The big part is just getting them to feel comfortable, say, with the instrument in their lap, because there's not a time in the day that we have a piece of wood with metal strings on it or nylon strings on it in our laps and we're trying to maneuver around it. It just doesn't really happen. As we're pushing through and maybe we're getting a little buzzing out, I'm already subconsciously brainwashed them to feel where the pulse is at using my voice. I'll start guiding them with my voice rhythmically in time on quarter notes for the most part, and then I'll guide them to move to the second fret. And then as we start scooting around and they get more comfortable going back and forth, which might take a handful of attempts, because something that'll definitely happen is we go from the third fret, we'll go to the second fret, and then we'll accidentally jump to the first fret. It's not a big deal. Again, rhythmically centered lesson. So if they go to the wrong fret, it doesn't matter. We're gonna repeat third fret and we're gonna cycle back anyways. And then we're gonna shift to the second fret, ready, go. And by this point, I'll have them go back and forth approximately 8 times. And I'm not directly telling them that we're gonna do 8 times, but I'm just keeping track of it. I generally have a rule of 8 or 4s, but as we're going back and forth and then we cross that bridge of the first 8, I'll give them a break, because now we would have probably eaten another 2 to 3 minutes, depending on how much we need to focus on the setup or correcting of the fretting paw, which more often than not is not going to take a very, very long time. After we take that initial break, it's one of the shorter ones. I'm usually only going to give them approximately 30 seconds, maybe a minute, because now we're crossing over the 10-minute mark. Now we're a third of the way done with the lesson already. And as we go back in for the next round and we do the next grouping of 8, when we get comfortable, not perfect, just comfortable, maybe they start pushing, they get a little bit of a clearer sound, and then we shift. And then when they move over, it's a little bit buzzy, we're flamming a little bit, it doesn't matter. This is that point where, as I feel necessary, I'll come in and apply extra pressure against their index finger and then against their thumb as well. And this way they can get a feel of how much pressure they need to apply in general while we're working in time and moving in 2 measure groups for every single note. As we get comfortable with that and cycle through it, we'll take another break for another approximate 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And now maybe we're at the 13-minute mark. So now I will have them assign their first finger to the second fret. and maybe we didn't need to do the second round, maybe they get it kind of quick, I'll give them this part right away. Other times, depending on how fast they pick up, say, fretting, I'll jump to this part right away and I'll just have them assign their first finger to that second fret. A lot of it is the feeling out process of how quick some of these learners are gonna end up progressing, because beginning or not, everyone is gonna have fluctuation no matter what their age demographic is. So the next chunk, when we have our index finger assigned to the second fret, and then our middle finger will go to that third fret, now we're gonna go back and forth. A lot of times I'll give them the cue or the assignment that their first finger is not gonna leave, it's just gonna stay there. So the more that we hold it down here, it goes a long way, but at the same time, especially if they're tiny humans, if they're 5 years old, even 4 years old, or even older than that, 8 years old, they might toggle back and forth. I'm not after perfect technique. Again, it's a rhythmically centered lesson. So if they're squeezing the third fret and their index finger's letting go, I'm not hyper focused on that. To me, it doesn't matter. I'm just getting them to move and feel in time. And by this point, for certain, I've started bringing an awareness to what the pulse is and how we count these numbers, like 1 and 2 and 3, and then we'll move, and 1, 2 and 3 and 4. And now the pulse has become this thing that instead of us chasing it, it's something that we're just using to guide us. Because again, if they're switching, and in this cycle, if they go to say the third fret with their middle finger from their index finger and they do 1 and 2, now I go back to my middle and it doesn't go over all the way, we have that second bar to stretch it over a little bit. And something that I'm doing at the beginning and for certain around this point is, as I'm pulling away from playing, I will get in their grill, and usually I'm squatting down at this point with a pencil, and I'll use the pencil and hover in time, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then we go to the second fret, then I'll move the pencil, so that way they have an extra visual cue, or a visual tool rather, to guide them back and forth, and 1 and 2. And again, I'm usually moving on the third beat, so that way they can see it move in time, and then they have preparation to go from one spot to the next one. And again, I'm not after perfect notes, but if someone's pushing through and they're not getting anything out, I will end up adding my fingers and applying pressure with them, so that way it's a team effort as we're figuring out how much pressure we're gonna apply. Again, especially if we're teaching tiny humans, or for certain senior citizens, where if they're 80 years old or in their 70s or maybe even in their 60s, or if they just have a certain physical limitation, maybe they have some kind of accident that prevents them from being able to provide that right amount of pressure right away, it's something that we need to build into, then again, it's not something that I'm hyper focused on. We will build finger strength. So now we're into the third phase. We've crossed over the second fret and the third fret. Now we have our finger assignment, our index fingers assigned to the second fret, middle fingers assigned to the third fret. And now I'm gonna add the last note in, which is gonna be the open first string. Although when I set them up to figure out what the numbers are, the fretted numbers, which will be 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, I did not explain what 0 is, or that there is even 0. I just like to play with people. I like to toy with them to see if they'll find it right away. It's amusing to me. It's funny. But it's funny for them too, because we're laughing together. We're not laughing at their expense. We will cycle this in real time as we would in the lesson. And our middle finger would start on that third fret of the third fret of the first string. And I'll always count everything in with a ready go. From the jump, I'm always giving the pulse with ready and go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and first finger, second fret, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Here comes the change. Then we go to 0. And a lot of time people will hesitate because they don't know where 0 is at. Other people will instinctively let go, and then we'll drop 0 right away. And something that's a 50-50 shot is when people hit 0, they'll let go altogether. Their hand will drop. Or, I'll jokingly tell them in the next break that this isn't the moment to go check our phone or reach down to tie our shoes. We want to keep that paw right where it's at because we're not done playing. We are going to need to fret a little bit more. So after we go from the second fret and then we go to 0. We keep our fingers close. If I need to, I'll tap their thumb to keep it on the back. Then we squeeze 2nd fret, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then this will be the end. And then we'll cycle it back to the 3rd fret. And now I'll tell them this is the beginning. 3 and 4, 1 and 2, and then the 1st finger, 2nd fret, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, and then we let go here, 0 and 2, 3 and 4. And again, if they let go, I'll tap their thumb to keep it close, 1st finger, and 1 and 2, 3 and 4. And I'll guide with the pencil as I need, and I might not even be playing at this point. And then I'll cycle it one more time. With the progression itself, I will usually do a grouping of 3s, sometimes 4, it just kind of depends. If they get through in a clean fashion, if they're struggling a little bit, what they're struggling on. If it's, say, finger strength, once again, not really highly concerned with it. If it's, say, general things like with their thumb, when we take this next break, which will cross over to probably the 16, 17, maybe 18-minute mark, this is where I reiterate some of those beginning guitar technique ideas. Thumb doesn't want to be underneath. We don't want to go super high over the top. If we have our fingers squeezing in this pinching concept, this pinching idea, where again, I'll demonstrate by pinching the top of my paw, goes a long way to reinforce those ideas. At this point, we will cycle it one more time. And after we do the next cycle, they've gotten through the entire thing. That will take us to the 20-minute mark. So now we have about 10 minutes left. And realistically, we have about 8 minutes left, because the last 2 minutes should be giving out the materials and recapping the lesson. And again, by this point, I'm still reinforcing a lot of the things that we were talking about in the early stages of all this. If we push through and the note doesn't come out all the way, it doesn't matter. If we go to the wrong fret, it doesn't matter. If we go to the wrong string, it doesn't matter, because music is repetition and we will repeat. There's always going to be more than one opportunity to play something correctly or to get it to be the way that we want it to sound. And something that I'm always referencing in terms of getting these notes to come out perfect, we might know as seasoned players what a perfectly fretted note is supposed to sound like, but I'll always tell them in the same way, which is in regards to how we perceive color. Ordinarily, I'm wearing all black. Most of my stuff is all black. My backpack is all black. My pencil pouch is all black. So I will tell them that we don't need our notes to be perfect. We don't need our rhythms to be perfect, because what's perfect anyways? It's like assuming that we see black the same way, this as the same exact color. And I'll point at my bag or whatever I have around me. And the idea is that I will tell them that there's no way that we see that the same color, because I wear glasses and I am pretty blind. I need my glasses to drive. It's on the back of my license. If I got pulled over without them, I will get a ticket. So for sure, we don't see it the same way. Nonetheless, the idea is us moving in time. Perfect doesn't exist. I'm not worried about that with them. And it's building that confidence with them. Not confidence just in themselves, but confidence in our time together. Confidence that I'm not here to judge them. We're here to jam. We're here to have fun and to learn something along the way. And now, as they've learned along the way that we're going to be playing the 3rd fret, 2nd fret, 0, and then the 2nd fret again in that order for 2 bars each, and we're going to run it back 3 times. Here's where I open this up and bring in the actual chords. I'll let them know that their fretting paw, be it their right or their left, is not going to do anything different. They will squeeze the same exact frets at the same exact times, and we're going to move in the same exact order. It will not change. But we are finally going to address our picking paw, the thumb. Instead of it going to the 1st string, we're going to go from the 1st string to 1, 2, 3, the 3rd string. And again, here lies why I don't worry about them playing with the pick right away, and why I prefer them to play with their fingers and use their thumbs, so they can feel that sensation of crossing through those 3 strings and they're pushing through. And at this point, again, as I mentioned, I'm not playing 100% in the lesson. I'm not even playing 50% in the lesson, but I'm always guiding them. And at this point, they might hit the third string, second, and then the first string in a disjunct order, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then they might start to get it a little bit quicker. Again, everybody's rate of learning is a little bit different, but if they do have that disjunct motion, if their thumb is getting caught on some of those strings, I'll go over how much of our thumb needs to be inside of that string before it catches, so that way it can roll through more smoothly and evenly. And then I'm also in front of them, squatting down again, and I'm using my index finger right next to their thumb, and I start retracting my index finger inward. And the idea behind this is that as my finger retracts, their thumb is going to match. And the whole time I'm guiding them with my voice again. The subtle subconscious brainwashing of where the pulse is at. And if I'm squatting down, I can't exactly tap. So with my other hand, I might be snapping. But no matter what, I'm giving them the pulse. And then we're pushing this against just open strings, just the E minor chord. So that way they can get that idea of how their right paw is trying to move through those strings, because it isn't different than what they were doing just on the first string. They're just pushing through more of them. Though I do suppose you can argue because you're pushing through more of them, it is inherently different, but I digress. And now we're here, baby. Now we're gonna put it all together with 3-string chord voicings. Again, I'm not worried about telling them what chords they're playing. I wasn't worried about telling them what pitches they were playing. But it does also depend. If they have said that they played clarinet and they've never played guitar, but they have an awareness of what pitches are, then yeah, I'll probably bring those things in. But for the most part, beginning guitar lesson, someone who's never played, tiny human, 15-year-old, 45-year-old, 85-year-old, doesn't matter. Those aren't the things that I'm necessarily getting hung up on. English go. So now they have the instruction. Fretting paw is going to do the exact same thing that it did before. Picking paw is going to roll through those 3 strings, and they're going to roll through them in one shot. And as we start piecing this together, the margin for error is larger, because even if we have the lens of it being primarily the same, we are still adding more things to it. And the more grace that we give them as the learner, the easier it'll be. The easier it'll be to keep flowing and just keep connecting everything. So I'll set them up with the 1, 2, ready, go. And here's the 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2. Then your first finger, second fret, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2. And then we let go, but our thumb stays because they might need a reminder. Adding in 3 strings can distract them. First finger, second fret, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. And then we go back to the 3rd fret, repeat, and 1. And then they might go to the wrong fret. But to me, it doesn't matter. I'll keep that pulse rolling, and then I'll guide them to the 2nd fret. And then again, this is where I squat back down, bring the pencil to the mix, let go 1. And then I start giving them that visual tool again. So that way they have to guide back to the 2nd fret, and I'm always counting. And if they're pushing through at this point too, the halfway point, they might get a little tired, and that first string might not come out as strong. So by the time we get to the 3rd repetition, which we're on right now, it may be that thing where their paw's gassing out, and then 1 and 2, 3 and 4. But we're almost there. I'll let them know that we're halfway, and then we 1 and 2. Something else that happens a lot at this point, and at other points as well, is they might need a stretch, and oh no, that's not the 2nd fret. I want it to be perfect when I land. What's perfect anyways, but I know it's supposed to be the 2nd fret. Okay, now they're on the 2nd fret. Ready, and then go 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. Hit the 3rd fret once and 1, 2, then we're done. But many times they'll keep on playing because they don't really notice that I stopped counting. I'll ease back into my seat now, getting up off the ground. And at this point, when we cycle through that entire thing, it's gonna take all of 1.5 minutes approximately, depending how fast you're gonna go. I'm usually rolling about this speed, this tempo, but it depends on the learner as well. And maybe we don't get all the way through it. Maybe we do. But at the same time, it's that thing that I mentioned, as we cater everything to them. I'm not even looking for the rhythms to be perfect. So if I need to stretch that measure so that way they can feel more secure in where it is that they're going to land, or if we have that time, I do take those liberties with them. And at this point, we'd be crossing over to approximately the 24 to maybe even 26-minute mark. And we might be out of time, give or take. So there might be time to run it back and hit it one more time. But ordinarily at this point, I like to stretch everything as long as I can. I'm just that kind of person where I'm trying to deliver as much content into the shortest time span that I can. And when we get to this point, if we do run it back, we're definitely going to be pushing it at the 28-minute mark, maybe even 29 minutes. There's a lot of times I go over my lessons, and it's a fault. I've been doing that for, like 9 years, and it's a habit. I get really engaged in what it is that we're doing and my learners, and at that point, we want to ensure that we have enough time to issue the learning materials. The learning materials have been on the music stand this entire time. And again, depending on the rate of speed of the learner, I may have brought up this stuff already. I may have showed them how to read a chord chart. I may have showed them how to read the tab. But more often than not, again, beginning guitar lesson, little to no experience for the learner themselves, not even just the instructor. It's really hands-on kinesthetic playing, kinesthetic environment where I'm up in their grill as much as I need to be, but not in an invasive way, but to guide them. So that way, the more that we have this playing, it's just back to back. And when we're not playing, we're talking about what we're about to do, and then we play again. So it's a real constant 30 minutes. Like it's a fast 30 minutes. Even if it was 45, it would be the same. If it's an hour, it's the same. I cram a lot of stuff into a really short amount of time. Again, preferably, we would want to have our lesson materials already prepared before the lesson starts. So that way I'm not having to dogpile at the printer with the other instructors and burn more time or potentially make my next student late to their lesson. Usually a good rule of thumb is to end and start 2 minutes early. So start 2 minutes early, end 2 minutes early. If the lesson is at 5 p.m., start at 4:58, end at 5:28. So that way you allot that time to make the lesson material, to go over the lesson material as you need, to converse with their parents as you need. If depending on your place of business and where you're teaching, if you're a freelance instructor going from home to home, or you're working at a music school like I do, and the front desk and the always helpful admin team, which I am also a part of, do the scheduling, that goes a really long way, because if not, you're going to need that time as well. But rolling through as much of the learning material as we can, it's probably going to overwhelm them, because 2 minutes is not enough time to absorb all of that and also to break it down. So if we can incorporate that into the lesson, into the scheme of what we had discussed, again, it's assessing where the learner is at in terms of how they're progressing inside of that 30 minutes. And if we can bring that stuff in, reading is going to be the thing that's the most helpful, because it'll be there for them on their own. It'll be how they can recreate what we did in the lesson. However, it's not going to be the fun part. So especially in the first lesson, it's really engaging them and getting them to follow through with this activity-based game, because it's all just one big game. And now to circle back to the setup, the reason that I do this here is because if we're fretting on the first string, we have nothing underneath that string that's going to impede our ability to squeeze that first string. If I was doing this on the, say, third string, there's a little bit more around it that can make it feel a little bit clunky. And again, tiny human, teenager, adult, senior citizen, whoever it is, it's a roll of the dice on how they're going to interact with that. So this is just a blueprint for us to make our own lesson plan. You can change the key, you can change the voicings, you can change the chords themselves, you can do this with full chords, you can do this in a multitude of ways, but it's the concept. English go. It's the concept that we're really after versus, say, the content itself. The bigger piece is having the content to teach the learner. Are we teaching the learner, or are we just teaching content? And while this is my lesson for 95% of my beginning guitar lessons where they've never played before, the bigger part is that it's a jumping off point, and I reiterate that with them as well. And this is where I iterate my teaching style and what that is. I'm not the kind of teacher that teaches out of books. I transcribe the music that my students are listening to. I get into what it is that they're doing. A lot of the time, especially if they're tiny humans or teenagers, they might not know what they're listening to. But if it's video game music, if it's something from a show, from a movie, from a musical, whatever it is, I will transcribe that and use that instead of, say, just a book. Although I do have books all the time. I always have books in my bag. I have PDFs. I have the books at my school, my place of business, at my dispense as well. The Alfred's Beginning Guitar series for kids is excellent. I've used it many times, and I use that to supplement my instruction. The Hal Leonard 1, 2, and 3 series for beginners is also really good. That's what I learned out of when I was learning how to read music when I was 20, because I was a late bloomer. If we're into classical, the Christopher Parkening series is phenomenal. There's a text out there to help us supplement our lessons and our lesson plans. And the more that we have, the better it will be. Thank you for watching this video and checking out my content. I greatly appreciate it. If you like this video, give it a like. Leave me some feedback in the comments. I engage with virtually everything that I see, positive or negative. Are you an inspiring guitar teacher? Do you have years of playing and maybe this is something that you have considered doing, but you just haven't pulled the trigger on it? Are you another instrumentalist and you're trying to incorporate teaching guitar into your repertoire so that way you can expand your studio? Let's have a discourse. Let's help one another. Let's create this community. I've been planning this series for a long time, and I will be publishing it on my 35th birthday as a present to myself and to others, but really to myself very selfishly. And the reason being is that creating a community for guitarists and educators and aspiring educators has been my goal with creating content from day one. I would love for this to be a contributing factor to opening the door for others to supplement their income using lessons, especially if they never considered that they could teach before, and making music is something that they want to do full time and they need a way to augment their income, or if this could be their primary vocation if they're moving into that direction. And I do believe that anybody could do this, and the more guitarists that are doing music full time and making a living off of music full time, it's a better world. I'm a guitar player, so clearly I'm biased, but I want everybody to have more opportunities. I taught myself how to play guitar in 2004 to Misfits records, and then I got into deathcore and grindcore bands in the big MySpace boom in the mid 2000s, and I've been playing guitar for 5 to 6 years before I had even considered teaching music because I hadn't studied it. I didn't start studying it until I was 19, 20 years old, and I taught my first lesson when I was 20, and now I am 35. So I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've been teaching full time for approximately a decade, or a little less than that, because when I finished undergrad, then I started teaching full time. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. Thank you again for checking out my content. I do have guitar lessons saved into playlists on my channel. There are 2 of them. One has full breakdowns with harmonic analysis, structural analysis, and things of that nature. And then there's another one of just playthrough style lessons with no talking whatsoever. Thank you again for your time, and I hope you have a great day. Peace.